They didn't hang her to kill her. They didn't whip her to break her. They did something meaner than both because it let every clean shirt in town stay clean, while a woman learned what pain feels like when it's turned into a public rule. Out on the Kansas flats where the sky looks endless and the wind has nothing to hide, 2 fence posts stood like a dare somebody carved into the land. Rope bit into wood, rope bit into flesh. And between those posts, stretched too wide for mercy, a young woman was held there in the open wrist, tied low ankles, bound high so her body had no choice but to obey the knots. Her dress was torn from road dust and struggle, and her eyes were wide in that way that says she's already counted every second and realized no one's coming. The town called it teaching, the kind of word men use when they don't want to say what they're really doing. It was late morning when the rider crested the rise and saw the whole thing framed against the wheat-colored prairie like a scene the world should have rejected on sight. He reined in hard, not because his horse spooked, but because something in him did. He was the sort of man who didn't stop for trouble anymore. Trouble had cost him too much already, but his eyes caught the ropes, then caught the way her hands shook like a candle flame fighting wind, and his chest tightened with that old familiar anger that comes when you realize cruelty is being performed, not just committed. His name was Jed Rourke. Folks in Dodge City knew him as the rancher who kept to himself and spoke only when he had to. They also knew he'd buried a wife once and never let the town see how it changed him. Jed was 49, all sun-browned muscle and worn restraint, a red bandana at his throat, and a hat that shaded eyes that didn't miss much. He looked like a man built for hard work, but his stillness was what made people careful around him, because stillness like that meant he'd learned how to wait. He didn't wait now. He slid down from the saddle and walked toward the posts, boots crunching dry stubble, the wind whirring at the ropes like it wanted to finish what the men who tied them started. Up close, the woman's breathing came shallow and quick, every inhale like it had to negotiate with pain first. Dust streaked her cheeks, a bruise bloomed dark along her shoulder, and there was something else too, something you couldn't put a finger on until you saw it enough times, the look of someone who has been told their body is not theirs and they're trying to remember how to keep it anyway. She saw him and flinched, not away, toward the ropes, toward the knots, toward whatever came next. "Please," she rasped, "don't." Jed stopped a few feet from her, close enough to help, far enough to not become another threat. He kept his hands where she could see them. That mattered. Out here, hands told the truth before mouths ever did. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said low and steady. "I'm here to get you down." Her eyes squeezed shut for a beat like she couldn't afford to believe him, and was angry at herself for wanting to. When she opened them again, her voice came thin, frightened and strangely specific, like a warning learned the hard way. "Don't. It still hurts there." Jed froze. Not because the words confused him, because he understood them. Pain like that lives in joints and tendons in places that don't show pretty bruises. Pain like that lingers. Pain like that makes the next touch feel like a threat, even when it isn't. He shifted his stance immediately, reading her posture, reading the strain in her shoulders, the tremor in her arms, the way her ribs fought each breath. "All right," he murmured. "Tell me where." "Shoulders, hips." She swallowed and nodded once. "Shoulder and my left side when I breathe." Jed stepped closer, slow as sunrise, and reached for the knot at her right wrist, then stopped again and looked at her face first. Permission. Not asked in words, but in patience. She didn't nod, but she didn't pull away either. That was all he got, and all he needed. He took out a small blade, plain clean, a working knife, and cut the rope in a way that didn't snap it free. He eased it. He supported her weight with his forearm before the tension could jerk her shoulder. That's what he did that was unthinkable out here. He treated her like a person, while she was still in the middle of being treated like a lesson. He worked each knot the same way, slow, careful, taking the rope off like it was a burning thing that might bite if handled wrong. When the last knot loosened at her left ankle, her body sagged at once, and Jed moved in, catching her mid-fall without grabbing at her, without yanking, without adding panic to pain. Her breath hitched sharp. She clutched at his shirt for balance like her hands had minds of their own. Jed adjusted his grip exactly where she'd warned him, under her ribs supporting her spine, keeping pressure off her left side. "Easy," he said. "Easy now. I got you." She shook, half from heat, half from shock, half from the sheer disbelief of being held without being claimed. Her legs didn't want to work. Her feet found the ground and immediately tried to leave it again. Jed lowered her carefully to her knees first, then guided her back until she could sit in the grass, leaning against one post like it was the only thing still real. He looked around then, because a thing like this never happens alone. No riders, no shouting, no men standing proud beside their work. Just the posts, the rope ends hanging limp, and a silence that felt too practiced to be innocent. The prairie was wide, but Jed felt watched anyway. Towns had a way of watching without showing themselves. Curtains twitching, porches occupied by men who stared at the road like it owed them comfort. The woman's voice came again, smaller now. They said, "Nobody would cut me down," she whispered. They said, "You don't do that here." Jed's jaw tightened. "What's your name?" She hesitated, like names cost money. Then with a breath that trembled, she answered, "Mara Dorsey." Jed knew that name. Not like family, not like a friend, but he'd heard it in town, once spoken with disdain by men who wanted their world simple. Mara Dorsey was the school teacher who didn't laugh at dirty jokes, the woman who wrote letters for widows, the one who asked too loud why certain ranch lines kept shifting on county maps, the one who'd said in the general store, calm as scripture, that a town that only protects the powerful is not a town, it's a trap. Jed had been standing in the back when she said it. He remembered because the room went quiet the way it goes quiet when truth walks in uninvited. "Mara," he said gently, "can you stand if I help you?" She tried. Pain flashed over her face so fast it almost looked like anger. She made it halfway up before her left side stole her breath. Jed caught her again. "That's all right," he said. "We're doing it slow." "Don't take me to town," she whispered, immediate and desperate. They'll do it again. They'll make it worse." Jed looked toward the distant line where Dodge City sat like a bruise on the horizon. He hated town roads. He hated what towns turned people into, but he also knew something Mara didn't have right now, the power of witnesses. And the kind of man who ordered this wasn't afraid of dark. He was afraid of daylight. "I'm taking you to a doctor," Jed said. "Not because I trust this town, because I don't, but because you don't get to die slow out here while they stay comfortable." Her eyes searched his face, trying to find the trick. Why she breathed. "Why would you?" "Because I've been the one people didn't come for," he said, and his voice carried something old. "And I'm tired of living in a place where that's normal." He lifted her again, careful, practiced keeping his forearm under her knees and his other arm supporting her back without crushing her ribs. As he carried her to his horse, the wind shifted and brought in a smell he didn't like, cigar smoke and soap. Town smell. Man who doesn't work for a living smell. A figure stood far off near the road, a man watching, not close enough to be accused, not far enough to be innocent. Jed didn't wave, didn't call out. He just kept moving, and he memorized the silhouette like a debt. He got Mara up onto his saddle in front of him, holding her steady as he mounted behind. She stiffened at the contact, but she didn't fight him. Trust doesn't arrive clean in people who've been hurt. It arrives in pieces. They rode toward Dodge City with the sun high and the prairie loud with grasshoppers and judgment. Mara kept her eyes on the horizon like she was afraid the moment she looked back, she'd see the posts again. Jed felt her breathing against his arm and matched his pace to it. He didn't talk much, because there are moments when talking feels like stealing air from someone who needs it. Still, she spoke once, voice small and bitter. "You shouldn't have stopped." Jed kept his gaze forward. "I already did. They'll come for you, let them." Mara let out a shaky breath that sounded like it wanted to become a laugh but didn't know how anymore. "You don't understand. In Dodge City, pain is legal if it's done by the right hands." Jed's jaw flexed. "Then we put the wrong hands in daylight." As the town drew closer, Mara's body tightened, like the very sight of it reached out to grab her. Dodge City didn't look like a villain. That was always the trick. It looked like a place where men bought flour and children chased dogs and church bells pretended the world was decent, but the porch sitters were already turning their heads. The street quieted in that particular way it quiets when everyone knows something ugly has happened, and nobody wants to be the one to say it out loud. Jed rode straight to Dr. Harlan Finch's office, because Finch had a reputation for one thing. He could be bribed to keep his mouth shut. but he could not be bribed to lie with his hands. He treated what needed treating. That mattered. Inside, the air smelled of boiled cloth and harsh spirits. Finch's eyes flicked over Mara's wrists, her shoulder, the way she guarded her ribs. He didn't ask questions the way curious men do. He asked questions the way tired men do, men who have patched up too many sins and still wake up in the same town. "Sit her here," Finch said. Mara hissed when he tested her shoulder. Jed stepped closer, not hovering, just present. "She's strained bad," Finch muttered. "And bruised. Left side, you said?" Mara nodded, teeth clenched. Finch looked at Jed. "Who did this?" Jed's eyes stayed on Mara. "Tell him if you want," he said quietly, "or don't." Mara swallowed, then whispered Silas Ketchum. Finch's hand paused just a fraction. Jed felt the name land heavy. Silas Ketchum wasn't a rancher. He was a businessman, which in Dodge City meant he owned other men's debts and called it work. He was the kind of man who sat clean in church and dirtied the world the rest of the week. Finch finished the bandaging, set Mara's shoulders gently as he could, and shook his head. "She needs rest. Days." Jed exhaled once slow. "She'll get it at my place." Finch looked uneasy. "Your place is outside town." "Exactly." The door opened behind them before Finch could say more. A deputy stepped in, badge, bright eyes, empty. And behind him, like he'd been waiting for his cue, came Silas Ketchum himself. He wore a clean vest, a polite smile, and the calm of a man who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. He took one look at Mara on the cot and sighed as if he'd found a stray animal in his parlor. "There you are," Silas said, soft and pleased. "We've been worried." Mara's body tightened. Jed felt it instantly, like a wire pulled taut. Silas's gaze slid to Jed, amused. "Mr. Rourke," he said, like they were old friends, "you've made yourself part of a private matter." Jed didn't move. "You put her on post like a carcass," he said, quiet as a threat. "That's not private. That's a message." Silas smiled wider. "Messages are sometimes necessary. People forget their place." Mara's voice cracked. "I don't belong to you." Silas's eyes flicked to her like she'd spoken out of turn. Then he looked back to Jed. Tone still courteous. "Sheriff has papers. Order of detainment." "She's a disturbance. She's been agitating, speaking." Mara whispered. Silas lifted one shoulder. "Same thing in a town trying to stay orderly." The deputy cleared his throat. "Mr. Rourke, you're to step aside." Jed didn't. He looked at Mara, saw her shaking, saw her trying to hold herself together on pure will, and he made the decision that would shake Dodge City harder than a gunshot in church. He stepped forward, and he did not reach for a weapon. He reached for Mara's blanket and pulled it up around her shoulders with a gentleness that made the room feel suddenly ashamed. "She's coming with me," Jed said. Silas's smile disappeared, not into rage, into something worse, calculation. "You don't get to decide that." Jed's voice stayed even. "Then arrest me." That moment right there was the unthinkable, not the rope cutting, not even the fight that could have followed. The unthinkable was refusing to play the town's